All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zill. It's good to be back on this very exciting season finale today. I was at MFF over the weekend, and we had a great time recording our live panel with Days. Days changed. They were a delight to have on, and I was really happy to get to chat with all the folks who showed up in person. So thank you to everyone who showed up, and really looking forward to putting that up at the start of next season. And speaking of next season, I have a bit of a special announcement. This show's been going on for quite a while, and I hope to continue it for a while longer. But in the past, we've been doing this on a bit of a weekly schedule, and starting next season, we are hoping to do this on an every other week schedule moving forward, just because it has been a lot of work, and I would like to continue to maintain the show and its integrity in a way that doesn't compromise the quality. And after doing 4 years of every week, that is something that it's not fully sustainable when it's just me and sometimes Libra. So just wanted to let you all know that. And if you want to continue to help the show go forward, you can support us at patreon.com/TFTuesdayPod. We have wonderful community here on the Discord and such, and it was really nice to see some of the patrons in person at MFF. I got to regale them by getting Baja blasted and then taking them to Olive Garden. So, if that sounds like your idea of a good time, you should definitely support my wonderful habits when it comes to cons. But enough about all of that. I have a very exciting guest here joining us today. So, Roscoe, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I didn't know I would be on the season finale. This is very exciting. My name is
very exciting.
My name is Roscoe. My handle is RoscoTF. So as you can assume, I'm a TF creator, untalented, traditional visual artist. I have no skills in that front, but I make up for it by doing every single other thing I can. I do lots of writing. I started off in photo manipulation, which I do less of now, but I still think it's kind of a cool practice. And then just in the past year or two, I've been getting into audio transformations, which has been a lot of fun. I do script writing, I do recording, I do audio editing for those, and then of course I am what I get in my cash flow, I put back out into the world. So I have I'm a big commissioner as well. If you've ever seen my OCs, notably Astrid, who I love creating wonderful TF works from other individuals. Been a big passion of mine recently, and I hope to continue all of that into the far future.
Hell yeah. And I will say that I definitely saw your work first through the photo manipulations, and that's very close to my heart. So it's always good to get to have another person who's familiar with the medium on the show.
Yeah, definitely. I have only worked in GIMP my whole life. Not a great software, but it's one of those things that like when I learned to use it, it really sucked for a long time. But then eventually I'm like, I don't think I can work in anything else. It's just not worth the time to like learn a whole new software. So, but I'm pretty efficient at it now. And I know how all the bits and bobs work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I will say, I started off in GIMP too, and it was an adjustment when I went over to Photoshop. It took me, at least a year of getting like a feeling for everything, and I'm glad I did it towards
you're glad you
the
made
start
the jump
of my thing. So
yeah, you're glad you made the jump though.
I am. No, I think one of the things I really appreciate about Photoshop, and I guess in particular with some of the more recent releases, which I found upon the high seas, is the fact that like there's a lot of really good tools that they've added, particularly when it comes to things like lighting and texturing, and a lot of the brushes that I use, I don't know if they would be 100% compatible with GIMP. I've picked up some brushes excuse me, for furring and like smudging and stuff over the years, and those were all Photoshop based. So if I didn't have those, I would be like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing at this
Yeah.
point.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. There are definitely some tools that you are just all reliable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But hey, there's also nothing wrong with GIMP. Like I've seen many a good GIMP piece. So
All of mine are. So
there you go. Well, I was curious just to ask how you kind of found your way into transformation, because I feel like everyone has their own unique sort of story behind it, and I would love to hear what yours was.
yeah. So I think there's a couple different ways to slide into this fandom. I think I've heard stories of people who kind of start off as furries and then kind of get introduced to people who are into sort of the more transformational side of things. Me, it's honestly just a fable of crossing wires. As much as I hate to admit it, when I was younger, I remember seeing what really got me, or I just one of the earliest memories was like staying at, I don't even remember whose house it is. I just remember seeing there's like a transformation in the Disney live action Maleficent movie from the 2010.
Oh yeah.
So this was a little bit of an older child at that point, but I remember seeing there's like a reversion from crow to human, where she turns this like
Hmm.
crow that's been captured by a net into a human. It's pretty detailed. I mean, it goes by pretty fast. I just remember that sort of sparking like a light in my mind. That was probably the first media where I saw that really awoke in that. But then later, upon some reflection, I remember that when I was a younger child, I used to play pretend of like turning into animals and like play pretend of.
Yeah.
I was a big pretend player, and so I was really just into that, like the idea of like pretending that you were an animal, just like in the mind's eye, and I really got into that. Then of course, unrestricted internet access. That's probably why I got into photo manipulation, because I think it was some of the easiest like transformation of fan art to find. DeviantArt is a dangerous
Oh yeah.
place, but um, and I think it was the wrong place to be, but it certainly got me thrust in this. I've been much more well adjusted since finding some much kinder people in the fandom and much more well adjusted people. But it was a rough couple of years, kind of getting
Yeah.
tumbled into the fandom. But then
Yeah.
from then
I'm
on,
sorry it
yeah,
was I'm sorry it was a bit rough, not to interrupt you, but
yeah.
was it just a factor of the populace on DeviantArt or the people there at the time? Because I imagine this was a few years ago.
Yeah, I made it was quite a few years ago actually. I made
Yeah.
one good friend, and I think naming names is a bad act, of course. But I made one, like my first real friend in the community who reached out to me, who was a photo manipulator. Um,
Hmm.
just kind of instilled some sort of concern, just like not concerning, but like was just a lot. I'll
Yeah.
say that much. Obviously, and it was like it just wasn't like a very chill relationship.
Yeah.
um, and obviously having found better friends and much kinder friends in the community, you know that the community is like really a place full of very creative and exciting people. But the first people that really got me into it or got me creating photo manipulations were just very deeply excited about the transformation, just in a more sort of perverse way, which I
Right.
kind of disavow now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess then my other question would just be, so you kind of moved on from that. Did you find that going to like other website or other spaces was where you then made better connections, or
Yeah.
like what did that kind of look like?
Oh, for sure. This is, I mean, not to just like plug certain groups and hate others, but I'm a big fan of Fur Affinity. I think it's good. I used to not like uploading there. I thought it was kind of awkward. I mean, it's still awkward, and it feels like when you post, nothing really happens. It's certainly not a social platform.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
sending a note in Fur Affinity feels like you're on the Pony Express or something. Um, but like, but like in the larger sense, I think anyone who I've met through Fur Affinity and has then connected with like on Discord, I think has been like just much chiller people because they're in the larger context of of furriness. I think a lot of people that I met on
Yeah.
DeviantArt um, were more often people who were like, "Oh, I'm not a furry. Like I'm not with the furries. I'm just into
Hmm.
transformation." Which is a valid like if you're truly set in that, I understand that, and that's valid. But also, I find that for the most part, people who are like, "Yeah, I'm into transformation," and like that's part of the furry community, and like I respect furries, shout out furries, and I am one, whether or not you are one,
Yeah.
identify as one. Just to be a more chiller, more open minded group.
Yeah. It's funny to hear you say that because I do get that. I largely agree. I think in particular, I mean, I didn't start with DeviantArt, but my own forays into it um, left some things to be desired, and it was definitely more of the furry spaces that I found allowed for a lot more willing exploration of a lot of different things.
Hmm.
So I'm glad that you were able to then like find those communities and also find people who were like more chill and more interested in kind of exploring
Yeah,
the things that you wanted to explore.
yeah, and I also have recently been getting on Blue Sky, which I really like. Blue Sky. I'm a big fan of Blue Sky. Having my own little Roscoe account is nice. I
Yeah.
actually just sent out. Well, it wasn't just sent out. Maybe like a week or two ago. My plans that I'm crafting right now for a large Blue Sky wide slash community wide sort of Nickelodeon Worldwide Day of Play, where we all pretend that we're turning into reindeers on December 20th. I'll plug that, of
Yeah.
course. I don't know if you saw that, but I'm trying to get that spread as far and wide as possible for a little bit of fun.
I love it. And I did see it, and I think that would be a lot of fun. So,
Yeah. So check that out. Keep that in mind, guys. On December 20th,
yeah,
we're all turning into reindeers over the course of the day. Just letting you
we're
know.
all reindeer.
Unfortunately, not much of a choice there. Sorry.
Well, I guess then, like getting into some elements with TF. I mean, obviously, when we turn into reindeer, every reindeer will look a little bit different. And I
Hmm.
know that a topic that you have professed a bit of fascination with is morphic resonance. And so, I would be curious to hear a little bit more as to what that means to you, how you would kind of explain it to the audience, and what really kind of drew you to the concept in the first place.
Okay, great way of wording that question. I can answer all of that and more. So,
Excellent.
first of all, definitionally, a little bit of schooling. I don't want to pay viewer, you're smart. I know you know things. But morphic resonance, I feel like a lot of times when I bring it up to other people in the community, they don't always like know what I'm getting at. And so morphic
Hmm.
resonance, I got this term originally, by the way, like the term morphic resonance just came up. It's on one of like those tvtropes.com pages. So you can find it like
Yeah.
tvtropes.com morphic resonance. And the example that they have on that website, I think is a really good example. It's this picture of like Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast,
Mm.
before and after his transformation, or like I think it's like before and after his transformation in from a human. And what's really
Yeah.
fascinating, I think that what Cogsworth, I think is the clock guy. Um,
Yeah.
and Cogsworth and Lumiere, like in their inanimate forms, in their sort of anthropomorphized inanimate forms, are one of them sort of stout. He's got the clock mustache, and Lumiere is sort of like taller, and he's a little bit lankier, but also sort of um, got a French je ne sais quoi. He's a little bit warblier. And when they both become people, obviously, when they become people, you realize that the forms that they were turned into in the house sort of reflected their human forms. And that's, in the
Exactly.
most general sense, what morphic resonance is. It's just the idea of when you turn into something, um, not just like assigning an animal based on what you look like, which I also think is a cool thing, but the larger sense, if you're
Oh
being
yeah.
turned into something, you are being turned into something that like whether it's like the fur pattern or like fur density or even like generic like colorings in different areas or also just like head shape or structure or other things like that sort of indicate the person that you were in the animal form. um,
Hmm.
I sort of got into that because I think, and obviously this is a whole separate can of worms, but I'm a little bit disheartened by the prospect of someone becoming an unrecognizable dog per se, or if someone's going to become a feral animal, to just be any old dog. I mean, there's sort of an appeal in that of like just like any other dog, right? Of like being
Right.
unrecognizable in some aspect. But in the larger sense, like if you're just going to become a feral animal, obviously this works in anthropomorphic cases as well. But if you're going to become a feral animal, I find the prospect of one becoming an animal that is just sort of them-like is really cute. It's really appealing, and I don't see it as often as I would expect. I think so. I'm just putting the word out, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you bring it up because I feel like on the one hand, when people become animals like their sonas, for example,
Mhm.
they really obviously want to stand out. They want to have the specific qualities that make that sona relatable back to them. But when I've seen a lot of feral transformations in particular, it's a lot more, like you said, almost like no recognizable qualities versus magic school bus logic, for example. Like that would be another
Yes,
example I
exactly.
think of
Oh,
when like
great
all the
example.
kids became animals, like
Yes.
that. It's like, okay, well, that one's Phoebe, that one's Arnold, etc. There's a lot less of that I've seen in transformation art, and I guess I wonder if it's because I wonder if it's because some people really get drawn to the idea of a feral TF because they kind of want to become anonymous, or they feel like it's conversely like validating their feeling of like, well, I'm just any old person and I'm going to become any old animal.
But you're not any old person. You listener, you're not
Yes.
any other person. Um, I think I do think it works a lot better for um, because I think it works a lot better for characters that are like OCs or that are already
Mm,
sort of designed to have interesting traits. One of my
right.
OCs, Astrid, has like kind of a distinctive, like curly hair sort of look, and my other OC, Ingrid, has sort of a ridiculous early 2010s side part that I think is really fun. And I love to try to see like both of those hairstyles are very distinct. I don't know if you've ever seen art from say like XBC9, I think is his name, XBC9. Um, he takes morphic resonance to or they take morphic. Sorry, I'm not. I'm actually not sure.
Yeah.
They take morphic resonance to a really exciting, so it's sort of like almost a cartoonish level in which sometimes their characters that they transform will become magically like an animal that just has their hairstyle, which is really cute and sort of
Right.
fun. But I also like the prospect of the hairstyle becoming sort of enveloped into the fur, which I think is really cool. Like if you can make a dog look like it has a side part, that's awesome. That's so cool. But that takes a lot of artistic skill. So you really like, I really admire artists who take that leap and who try to incorporate that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree in that. I think it takes a lot of skill to be able to incorporate it in a way that is natural. I think it's funny that you mentioned the focus on the hair because when I think about like a lot of the early, I guess, early transformations that I was drawn to, both in terms of art and media, I definitely felt more of a connection to the art pieces in which the hairstyle was still distinctive, which is an example of that. And I didn't really think
Mhm.
about that until you kind of worded it in that way. And I almost wonder, like, myself personally, I mean I love all kinds of TF. I've definitely leaned more towards anthropomorphic TFs as of late versus I think a
Mhm.
lot more feral transformations in the former. And I guess now I'm wondering if that has anything to do with the oft-cited like lack of personalization that you get when you don't consider morphic resonance. I don't know. I never really thought about that before, but now you've got me thinking about it.
Yeah, I think there's this big divide in our community between anthropomorphic transformation and what is known then conversely as feral transformation, right? And it becomes almost a point of contention. Like you're meeting someone and you're like, oh, are you more into anthropomorphic TFs or feral TFs? And your answer to that
Hmm.
response is apparently really descriptive of your tastes for some reason.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure entirely why, because I think they're not all that different. Sometimes sometimes a person can become an anthropomorphic character that is completely different than them, that looks nothing like them, that could be seen
Mhm.
as like almost an erasing of identity, right? Like in becoming a completely different anthropomorphic character, especially in like say character TFs, where someone's becoming
Mhm.
like becoming both the mind and body of an anthropomorphic character, that is in some sense a real identity death. Um, and
Yeah.
yet, there's this assumption that anthropomorphic TFs are in some ways more humane, or in some ways like not about erasing the self. It's just about becoming sort of a better self. And then also this assumption that feral TFs are sort of um, dehumanizing, that are in some sense destructive. And I think with the use of morphic resonance, you can have a really sort of cute, playful, as if someone were just becoming their spirit animal, as if someone were just becoming like a witch's familiar, still very like
Mhm.
playful, very sound of mind and body. I think people assume that there is less thematic crossover between anthropomorphic and feral TFs. And in the regards to this, like there the crossover is really large. I think at the end of the day, it's
Mhm.
just a matter of form. And people assume a lot of things about the themes of those two types of TF, which I think are
Yeah.
often wrongly assumed.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of like people reading into specific themes when that's either there or not there.
Mhm.
And I guess then because we've talked about like how interesting it is to kind of have that self or sense of self correlated between the original and the final form. For the people who are really into being completely like erased, for lack of a better term, not even just
Yeah.
like visually, but also like mentally speaking, like going through like a full identity death into like just an animal or something. How do you feel about that approach, and how does that connect back to morphic resonance? Because that's obviously basically the antithesis of that. There is nothing left whatsoever of the original person. How have you felt about those kinds of transformations?
So honestly, as a fantasy, I think destruction of the self really plays into fantasy. I understand just
Mm.
upon being stressed, the idea of you want to be not you. That's what's at the base of a lot of TF. Not all of it, but some of it
Oh
is a
yeah.
want to be not you, and I really respect that. But also, there's this quote that I think pops up sometimes that I think is really good, that I really like personally, that kind of plays into morphic resonance, but also this identity death, or I guess destruction of the self, I think is a better term.
Hmm.
And it's this line of like when someone has been transformed and they look nearly unrecognizable, or at least to themselves, they are now just a simple animal. And hearing the line of like, hey, doesn't that animal sort of look like Roscoe, is a great line. I think that
Hmm.
incorporates a lot of things without saying that like you can still be removed of all of your selfness. You can be stripped of everything that makes you human or makes you you. And now you're just a simple animal.
Hmm.
And yet still it might be gratifying from the outside sense to have someone reminded of you by your simple animal self. And I think that's what morphic resonance can do. Obviously, if you want nothing of that, if you really want to be something completely different, well, then we go into sort of the reality shift direction of things, where it is just like the world is being reshaped so you never were. It's not like you
Right.
were and now you are not. It is as if you never were. But that, of course, throws away the want to even be recognized or even someone be reminded of you in the larger sense.
Yeah. No, I think that's fascinating, and that does really segue nicely into kind of the next topic I wanted to really get into with you, which is related to reality shifts, because there is a bit of a connection to morphic resonance, but also my understanding is that you like to come at it from a bit of a different angle, and so I'm someone who really does like reality shift in transformations. I'm literally working on a story that has one in it right now. But I am curious to hear what your approach is and why you feel like it's unique and also potentially goes against the grain of some of the other reality shift TFs in the community.
All right. So, yeah, I definitely don't want to pit myself against anyone else because I think,
Oh yeah, for sure. I like to highlight the contrasts that artists bring from their own unique perspective. It's not a
yeah,
better or clashing. I just if someone has a unique take, I'm gonna ask about it.
certainly that's a great direction to come from. I like that disclaimer.
Yeah.
I recently played with some of my friends a reality shifting role playing game,
Hmm.
kind of a one-on-one thing where I sort of run the situation and they're making decisions to try to shift reality into a state
Hmm.
that they are intending to shift things. There's a lot of strange rules about this world, but the main idea is that there in this game, and this is not exactly how I treat all reality shifting, but the idea is in this
Hmm.
game there are three ways to affect reality. One is verbal, it's through talking to someone with words, and what that does is that can change the logic of a scenario. If you're talking to someone as if they were a dog, if you're using the logic of, oh, this person is going to be a dog, and this is why I need to change their sense of logic, um, that can be a very helpful way to change them, especially if they're susceptible to logic and like to social pressures and to like, oh right, I'm not supposed to be up on this chair. Like that makes sense. Thank you for reminding me. I'll return down to the floor, right? Or like, oh right, I don't eat up here. I eat from down there. Or oh right, I'm supposed to be following you. Thank you for reminding me. Those kind of things are really helpful, and that's a good way to sort of change things. The second one is um, physical transformation, and that's not necessarily of the person.
Mm.
Because to jump ahead a little bit, my main
Yeah.
idea is that reality shifting transformation, in the perfect reality shifting transformation, the person doing the changing or the thing doing the changing shouldn't have to affect the person directly at all, like physically or anything. It's the idea that by
Oh.
like all of the changes around it, you are then whipped into this new set of orders in which you are something else, and you're kind of being
Right.
sludged into that box. So to reel back, second change is physical, but it's changing of physical objects. Maybe a physical object that is related to them or close to them. Like if they realize that like their bed is now does not have a bed frame anymore, that and is now
Hmm.
on the ground and a little bit smaller and rounder, then they might understand what kind of bed that is. Or if this is kind of a weirder one, like if they, but also eating is good. Like if their
Hmm.
plate is now a bowl, classic. I was just talking
Right.
about that. But like that that's changing an object that is close to them, and then they just have to interact with it differently with their kind of growing snout, of course.
Hmm.
And then the third and final one is kind of the most volatile, is a word I use a lot when I'm playing this game. But it's volatile in that it is just changing. It's a larger, like you're just changing the motivation of the space as a whole, and
Ah, yes.
that will change like the whole room. That will sometimes inadvertently change like what we could consider more like non-player characters, more side characters. It'll
Hmm.
change sometimes the view out the window, right? Suddenly the view of the city starts to look a little bit more like each building is more like a clump of trees, or even
Right.
further, like the view out the door kind of looks a little bit dirty until you realize that you're actually underground and you're a group of rabbits in like a hole or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that change is the most volatile because the person doing the changing, in this game at least, can be sort of sucked into the larger aesthetic change if you're doing it too much. So it's very helpful, the third
Right.
option, to just push things in the right direction if somebody's kind of stubborn against what you're trying to do. But
Uh huh.
um, so yeah, it's helpful in that sense, but also you might find yourself getting caught up in the own logic that you're spinning, the own logic that you're
Right.
manipulating. And so I use that
Yeah.
as an example of like, obviously that's a game. If you want to play this, if anybody wants to play this game with me, I can run a session with you. It's a blast. I really love playing it. Um, but like, that's also kind of how I write my stories. This idea that you are changing things by just pushing the logic and the aesthetics of a location in a new direction, and you're seeing
Hmm.
how they fail to fight against it, right? I don't know how much
Right.
that truly differs against other people. I also really like gradual. One thing I really love is name change. I love gradual name change a lot, where you change each letter like bit by
Hmm.
bit. That's really a big, because it just shows how like no matter what you're doing, just the larger context of even your own name is just starting to sort of slide out of your control. And there's nothing you can
Yeah.
do about it because you don't know which letter changed last. I think it's the perfect example of how things change.
Yeah.
I've been sort of yapping, so I'll let you take like give a couple comments
No,
on
no,
that.
I find that so fascinating. It kind of reminds me of, and this isn't how everyone I've read has gone, but it sounds to me almost like a more gradual version of a TF isekai scenario, in the sense of like I've read a few where, someone will end up in this new location or place, and then because of the force or exertion of the location place they've ended up, they start to change to match the environment around them. And that's a much more like truncated version, I think, of what you're
Yeah.
kind of describing. Like you're getting a lot more into the process of like, these small things are changing, and then you kind of have a snowball effect. And then at that point, the snowball's so big that you end up getting pulled in as well, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating to me. And I think it's interesting too, because I think a lot of the reality shift TF that I have read usually starts with the person themselves starting to experience changes before reality starts to change around them. So this is
Yeah.
much more of like we're changing everything around you first before you get pulled in, which I do think is unique. I don't see that as often.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess the question I would just have around that is, do you feel like you then have to like set up a lot of rules in advance? Like, for example, if we're to use the rabbit situation as an example, like if
Mhm.
you're changing the room around someone into being kind of like a burrow almost, do you need to think about like, oh well, how is this person going to fit in the burrow before they've started changing, or like where are these other rabbits coming from? Like, do I need to assemble a bunch of other people in the vicinity to make this work? Like, do you struggle at all with like that sort of rule aspect?
And I think I don't, and which can frustrate people sometimes, um, because that's the power of working with words. Is that
Hmm.
I don't know. I haven't read this in a while, but I long time ago. I mean, what I really like is sort of the writing style of, say, Alice in Wonderland, in which by
Hmm.
merely saying that something is now true, the mind just has to work to make it true, because the mind is really powerful in that
Right.
sense, in that it can ignore sometimes the limitations of physicality and instead favor whatever language you're throwing in front of the reader. And I think that's a tool that sometimes people don't take advantage of because they are worried about their story making sense, and or like, oh, my story could be illustrated if need be. And I don't think that needs to be a requirement. I remember when, like, so I did write a story that was I actually did write a story that involved sort of the bunny burrow thing, and it was okay. It's kind of corny. I ended up turning like a casino into a British garden, like a garden in the UK, and I really liked that because there were lots of different things to do, but then also like interesting changes in perspective and size, and
Hmm.
it was a lot of fun because it is just like, yeah, you start out as a large like casino, but then by the end of it, it's either the world is really large around you or everything is really small
Hmm.
around you based on which side of that reality you get pulled towards. But whatever it is, it
Right.
just has to become true. I think I remember by the end of it, the person who did the changing became one of the gardeners, I believe, and everyone
Hmm.
else became sort of the snails and the bugs and the tomatoes even. But there was a group of sort of like casino worker, sort of bunny girl types that were in the break room that then became all bunnies, which was really cute and really fun. But you don't have to worry about where the break room is in relation to the rest of the building, because all that matters is by the time
Hmm.
that it's a bunny burrow and all of these bunnies are in their burrow, they're in their burrow. It's underground. It's underneath. You don't have to wonder how point A gets to point B. You just have to know that it's sort of sliding in that direction. And so, oh, the walls are dirt and the girls' kind of teeth are more pronounced and they're starting to like regard each other as sort of like a closer family. And one of them's like munching on something, you're not sure what, and someone else is sort of digging at the ground. And the exit is the hole that you remember building. And by the time I've told you that they're all in a bunny burrow, you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. That's where they were going, anyways. You
Hmm.
don't really have to worry about much of it, which I think it makes sort of literary sense, even if it doesn't make logistical sense. Um,
Right. Yeah. I really appreciate you saying that because I find that I think sometimes people can get really caught up in like the minutia of things and miss kind of like the forest for the trees. And
mhm.
in particular with like reality TF, like we've talked a bunch about, this potential rabbit scenario, but I can think of also like, things that are a bit broader. Like for example, there was a reality Shift TF I read a very long time ago on CYOC, which is not a website that people should go on anymore. But anyways,
True that.
there was a reality shift. Yeah, there's a reality shift that I read a long time ago that was based on like the Chronovac concept.
Oh yeah, shout out to
And
Chronovac. Yeah.
yeah, shout out to Chronovac, getting all of us reality TF lovers going. Um, Anyways, the story that it was involved with had it was like an interplay between two people. I don't remember like all of the story fully, but one of the things that stuck with me was there was a branch off of the story. I think one person had turned the other into a dog, for example. And there was a branch off of the story in which someone was kind of like, for lack of a better term, was trying to like rewrite the previous change to be more like correct in quotations. And that really stuck with me because I was like, look, I know that maybe there were like some small errors here or there in terms of like the overarching logic, but it felt kind of weird to see someone like nitpick it apart that much. And I guess I just, yeah, I sometimes I wonder about um folks who, and again, there's nothing wrong with leading into the details. I love the details. But I've encountered this sometimes with just like writing in general with world building and such. And maybe it's just because it's not an inherent skill for me, but sometimes I worry that in our quest to get perfect, we may focus on the wrong things instead of, say, the themes and such. And I think the themes with reality TF are so important to get right. Like it's all about the vibes at the end of the day. If you're not nailing the vibes, then what are we doing here? I guess is
Yeah.
my overarching point.
And I think all respect to the animals and the lives that animals lead, but animals are involved with far fewer objects than we are
Yes,
as people.
correct.
And there's a difficulty I've had before where I'm changing. I actually might be mixing stories. But like where I'm changing like a person's room to say like a dog pen, right? A dog does not have that many things in its pen compared to all of the knickknacks and the bedside tables and the lamps and like the posters. Those can't all become things, right? Um,
Hmm.
some of them have to just not exist by the time that this story is done. And I think a
Yeah,
good rule
exactly.
of thumb is if it doesn't exist by the time it ends, don't mention it. Don't talk about it. Either you'll understand that the rest of the things that you are changing are more interesting and more engaging, and the reader probably won't notice. Or if the reader does notice, well, then they have no details to read about. It's not like you've done a bad job at changing these worlds, because the worlds got changed. And I feel like, yeah, like if there's an element of the starting point that will not end up, that can't easily end up in the ending point, um, don't include it. Don't write about it,
Yeah.
because honestly, in the logic of the world, if your world was truly changing into a new reality, these pointless items are probably the first things to leave your mind, or the first things to leave like the
Yeah.
logic of the world. It's the important items. It's the bed and the windows and the door. That's what's really defining your space, and that's what's going to define the end point as well. And if a reality shift were real, those are the things that would be commanding the logic of the space, and that's what you should be describing anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the window and the door in particular are two things that are so key to like nail in a reality shift
Mhm.
TF because like you said, it's your almost like your gateways out to the world itself, and so therefore the best way to see how everything else is changing around you, and all the little things in between are far less important to the themes and what you're going for than those like really like important parts to nail.
Yeah. Can I talk on windows for a moment?
Yes.
So do you have a window in wherever you are right now? Are you in like a basement or something?
So I'm on the ninth floor of a building, so I actually have
Wow.
a Juliet balcony in this room that I'm in. So it's both a door and a window, which
That's
is a little
perfect.
bit confounding, but anyways.
Awesome. I actually wasn't gonna do anything. I was just curious. Um, yeah. So like, well, I've got a lovely view right now of the street outside, and
Hmm.
what I really like, because obviously I'm talking about how reality shift is indicated by context, and it's like the larger context of the world is going to be changing, and windows do the exact same thing. You kind of look out the window to know the context. Right now I'm looking outside
Right.
and I'm like, oh, it like there's still snow on the ground. It's not snowing, but there's snow. Most of the snow on the street is melted, so I don't really have to worry about cars having to pull out through a bunch of snow. Like the trees, the leaves are gone. I see other buildings. I don't see many people walking outside, and if they did, they would have a lot of layers, so I know it'd be kind of cold. There's so much context that you get
Yeah.
about the place that you live, and also what time of day it is, right? Like there's so much context you get from the window. Now imagine I like look out the window, I'm like, oh, it's like not as busy as it was before. There are less people coming to look at me than before. Like, oh, I remember like that nice guy from like yesterday who seemed like he might actually want to take me home. Um, or like, oh, the vet hasn't been by in a while, or like the attendant hasn't been by in a while.
Yeah.
Oh, where are my friends? Like those kind of things that a dog would think when looking out a window or out a place that you're looking out are so easily informed by just looking out the window, and it changes so much just by changing what you're seeing. And that's a really easy thing to sort of manipulate, the power of looking out the window to create the context of where you're living right now.
No, absolutely. I think that that's such an interesting way of thinking about it in terms of like almost trying to get yourself into the mindset of whatever it is that you might be about to become and then kind of building the story around that.
Ooh,
Almost like
yeah,
a
I haven't written a
it's
story like
almost
that.
like
That would
working
be cool.
back.
Yeah. Like maybe a
Oh
bunch of
man.
window
Yeah.
vignettes, right, of different people looking out windows,
Yes.
finding different context.
I think that would be cool. I think that would fuck.
Yeah, I
Free
like that
story
idea.
idea for people.
Very
So
good idea. Yeah. Contact me.
yeah. Well then I guess one other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on is you kind of have a really interesting art output in the sense of, you've done, photo manipulations, you've done writing, and then you've also done audio TFs. And all of those have their kind of like benefits and drawbacks. I was curious to start with just asking a little bit about audio TFs because I don't think we've had someone on before who's done audio TFs. What was it that like first kind of drew you to them and like fascinated you enough to like make some?
Ooh, I think part of it was, I think that the first bit of like audio TS is like, well, what can I do to make it feel like I'm transforming? And I think photo manipulations play into that quite a bit, in that you can look at a picture of yourself that looks like you're transforming. That's really powerful. And I think that kind of fulfills something inside someone when they feel like they want to feel like they're part of a transformation. But even deeper, I think, because I don't look at myself in the mirror that often, but what I do encounter a lot is my own voice, right? Is hearing myself talk all the damn time. And so I think my interest in audio TF kind of came from like, man, I wonder if I could just to hear myself say it, just to hear myself make these sounds. I think originally it did. I mean, it originally was just like taking voice memos for my friends of like, hey, listen to this audio of like me, like here's what it would sound like if I was slowly turning, like I was turning the dog over a course of a couple minutes, and like just trying to like
Mhm.
make my voice feel like it was roughing up and feeling like barks were just like spilling out. And like that was such a good exercise. It was so gratifying. I was like, oh, I have to do this. Like, what other animals can I sound like I'm turning into? I was really um, excited by the prospect. And
Yeah.
so I kind of got into that as a sort of like voice memo thing for like close friends who also enjoyed like sort of hearing it. Because obviously the niche for hearing some other guy pretend to turn into animals isn't as interesting as hearing it for yourself, right?
Oh,
But
absolutely.
like I had some people who were willing to hear it and were super interested in it, and I'm so thankful to that. Thank you to my audience, of course. But then from there, I'm like, well, I can make this more realistic. I can come up with scenes that sound like they're somewhere and add sound effects and edit that. And then even further, I'm not sure how much I actually like this latter part, but even further, I can edit the voice so that it literally sounds like it's becoming more animalistic, which is
Right.
so. It varies in terms of success, but it still adds a cool effect of truly sounding inhuman, and it's just a beautiful visual painting to be able to create. So that's what I really
Oh yeah.
love about it, and that's how I kind of got into it too.
Hell yeah. No, that makes sense. I think like the draw of what would it look or sound like if it was me is like one of the biggest draws towards making art in the first place. So I'm glad that that was kind of one of the inspirations in terms of wanting to see how you would sound as various animals. Because I find audio TF to be, it feels a lot more niche than a lot of the other kind of mediums within transformation. And yet at the same time, like, I think about the media that got so many of us into transformation, and it wasn't just static images or silent films. Like they all had audio tracks associated with them, which were pretty
Yeah,
formative for a lot of people.
true.
So I feel like
Yeah,
it's a pretty, important component.
I couldn't even tell you how excited I was when one of my pair of jeans started to get like a really big like hole in one of the knees. I was like, oh,
Oh
like
yeah,
this hole in these jeans are getting big enough that I can just set up a microphone and just record myself tearing these jeans to shreds. And I remember just like being so excited upon like getting all of this great foley work of like the
yeah,
sound
yeah.
of just tearing jeans. But that's another sound that people seem to really connect to transformation is the sound of like ripping clothes. And I'm glad I
Oh,
got very good
100%.
recordings for that. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, so you've made audio TFs, you've made photo manips and written stuff. Um, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what you find the limitations of each can be because, when it comes to visual art, obviously there is often like it's a snapshot in time. It's a little bit more difficult to communicate like a story through them, or at least like a fully realized story. With audio TFs, obviously, like, you can hear a whole story from start to finish, but you don't get the visuals. I'm just curious what you find limiting about each one of those and if the solution in a sense is to marry them all together or if you feel like each one's limitations actually enhances the appreciation of each individual piece.
Truthfully, a good question, by the way. Truthfully,
Hmm.
I think that writing, there are, maybe this is a hot take, but I think writing has very few limitations at all. I think the prospects of
Oh,
being able to conjure up an image with just words have created some of the best mental images I've ever had because the mind, or at least my mind, is like really has a really vivid imagination, and when led by the right words, can create like a truth of transformation that's truer than like any other TF medium that I've consumed. The only problem
yeah.
is it's hard to write. It's hard to get the images in your mind onto the page. And sometimes it's even hard to read too. It's like sometimes your mind works better than your eyes do. And reading through a whole story, especially if whatever author you're kind of reading doesn't kind of paint the picture you want, is, I mean, obviously we should respect artists for what they create. You shouldn't just expect the
Mhm.
perfect thing from them. It's an art form, of course. But it can be frustrating when you give a sort of transformation literature like a shot, and yet it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it's doing the justice of the written word. I've obviously written some stories that really dropped the ball. I'm not saying I'm above this, but like,
Mhm.
and when at their best, literary transformation is some of the most vivid, intense transformation I've ever read or I've ever consumed. There's just a lot of
Yeah.
variability, of course. Photo manipulations are great because they create a really instant image. They, when done well, they can look like they're real. They're very vivid. Um, they're very
Mhm.
cool, but also they are in some form they're very direct, and so a lot of times without like anything written or without larger context, you don't really get the fun of the context of a transformation. You just sort of get the um, visual aesthetics of someone who is turning into an animal, which is a great thing to see. It's very gratifying, but
Yeah.
it's not as to be a little pretentious, it's not as spiritually gratifying. It doesn't feel like you're really getting around what makes transformation great, but you're getting around what makes transformation awesome, what makes it look really cool.
Mhm.
The photo manipulations
Mhm.
have created some of the coolest looking
Oh, yeah.
um, audio transformations, I think, have a lot of potential. They can create really great images, but of course, you don't get the things that then aren't spoken. The biggest limitation of audio transformations is like you can't set the scene beyond what you can hear, which is very difficult.
Right.
Obviously, you can write scripts to be read along, so you're like sort of reading what's happening, or you can like I don't. I'm not a fan of the concept of like narrating a scene as voice acting is going on at the same time.
Yeah, it feels hokey whenever it
Yeah,
happens.
it breaks immersion. I'm not a big fan of like
Yeah.
I like it sounding like you're really sitting there, or like it's like a real recording that somebody caught on their phone, something like that. I really like those kind of
Mhm.
situations. And then another issue is finding other people to do it with you, because I think as much as I love doing solo transformations, and there's been another challenge as well, is like when I get a commission for an audio transformation, I can only really do that project by myself, because if I were to bring in other people, well, I guess then I would just be paying them to join me in that project. But it is like I don't know. I would love to do the sort of, what is it? Is it like Kinky Utterances that has like their big crew of people, like 3 or 4 people who
Oh,
do like,
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is it's kind of cool and admirable. But I like the idea of being able to like recruit other people to your project to do things. But of course, that isn't as
Mhm.
lucrative, of course, because then it isn't like, oh, I've got this. Like, let me create something great for you. It's like, all right, now I got to get a team of
Yeah.
people together to create the scene that you want, and then it's much more of like a production studio sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious then to hear as well, because obviously one thing that audios and written TFs have in common is they both have a written component. It's just obviously the audio part is reading out of from like, a script that's been assembled.
Mhm.
Um, when you've created both pure audio TFs and then stuff that has written components, obviously I imagine the written portion is very different because you can describe a lot more without breaking immersion in a written story. But um, do you also find that there are limitations in terms of the kinds of stories that then you can tell with audio TF, or do you feel like you can really tell any transformation story through an audio TF? It's really just a question of what you can then articulate that's being limited.
No, I think that audio TFs, the type of stories you can tell, are very limited, and maybe for a good
Hmm.
thing, because they rely on you to creatively think like, what situations will require people to be talking, require people to be to articulating things out loud of what is happening, or what they're seeing or who they're talking to. One of my favorite projects I ever did was called Drool. And oh my God, I love this project so much. It was so much fun to do. And the general idea is this guy gets a vape that when you hit it, you kind of get a dog's voice for a second in like your coughing and like sort of your immediate high. When you hit it, you can bark. And obviously the scenes that were him talking with his roommate, perfect. I loved doing those. The scenes that were him at the parties, oh, great. Like he's talking to people, he's riffing, he's trying to hide the fact that he enjoys hitting this vape so much and he's going to hit it way too much and start transforming. Um, but the pieces that are the hardest to write is like, oh, when he gets home back to his apartment, right? And he's in his room after he finally ordered his own after hitting his friends at the party, and he's like ready to try it in the comfort of his own home. Well, now he's alone. What's he supposed to be doing? He's like, oh, one more hit couldn't hurt. Or like, oh, what's this feeling? Oh, I feel kind of like nobody really talks like that. Nobody really talks to themselves in that sense. But you have to kind of suspend disbelief. And I would imagine in stories that go even further beyond that, where it is somebody by themselves having difficulties, there's a huge suspension of disbelief that someone's going to be talking and describing things and being very outwardly loud about what is going on and what is wrong, rather than just dealing with the problem. That just makes audio TFs tricky, but in a good way, because then you have to see, well, what situations am I going to put someone in so that they can just talk a lot?
I definitely feel like there are some scenarios that could potentially work in a way that wouldn't be satisfying for a listener. And so as such, I think I agree with you in the sense of like, you really need to have some sort of kind of scenario or situation or transformation where there is just a lot of talking inherent. And I guess I'm curious how you feel about this. I find that the introduction of a second person instead of just like someone solo undergoing a TF is often the best way to help with that sort of conveyance, because you can have the interplay and it can have a little bit more of like explicit description without feeling reality breaking. But I don't know, I was curious to ask how you feel about that.
Oh, totally. The moment you have a second person, you have an observer. They can kind of play the person who's not transforming, unless both people are transforming, which is also great. But whoever is playing the non-transformer or the other person to the transformer can play the role of the reader or the observer, and could be like, holy shit, dude, look at your arms, or look at, there's something behind you. There's something like wagging behind you. They can play the observer. The second person is so important. And yeah, and I've had a couple projects that are with other people. And as much as I love to do projects by myself and I love to sort of see how much of a picture I can still weave with just the power of one voice, I think two voices or two figures very clearly talking can do a lot. I'm also intrigued. I just started making a transformation like ASMR videos recently, which is a lot of fun to try. And that's really good because you can play the role of the observer as if the viewer were the second person.
Right.
You can just point out their changes. And you don't need a response because you can just leave it up to them to observe the fur that they're growing. Right. And
right, exactly.
That's been a really exciting prospect. I'm really excited to do more with that because I think there's a lot of potential there.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, I did also want to ask you about one other topic, and that is related to kind of what we've been chatting about. And that's in particular, like the voice as it relates to transformation, and in particular, people's voices as they undergo transformation, which is a big part of audio TF, but is an important part of creating many kinds of written TFs too. I was curious to hear a little bit more about how you think about people when they're undergoing a transformation and how their communication might change. Because obviously, you know, if someone's turning into a dog or vice versa, there's going to be different senses of words that they may or may not know or gain or lose or have different ways of communicating. And so I was curious how you kind of conceptualize that in your transformation work.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think me personally, I've long been of the opinion that in my audio TFs at least, the things that I'm voicing, that the words that someone can use are kind of the same words that they can always use. They don't lose vocabulary in the act of their transforming. They just become a little bit more panicked and worse at articulating what they want to say because the moment is more dire. Am I allowed to do like a little?
Right.
Should I do like a little? I don't need to do a little demonstration.
You can. It's up to
Okay.
you.
I'm just thinking of like how someone's voice would become a dog's, and I feel like the easiest way is first of all like you roughen things up like a little bit. You kind of slur things a little bit, like just kind of the first indications. And for me, the first indications are always the best because it's like, oh, something is like a little bit wrong,
Yeah.
right? You hold
Something's up.
you hold R's a little bit longer, and then one of the best indications, and this is kind of hard to always articulate, is the tongue. And it's like
Right.
the dog tongue is an icon of dog transformation in general. And this is just an example. Yeah. But once the tongue falls out, it's a lot harder to talk. And you find different words kind of coming out sharper and more intense,
right.
you know? And it all makes less and less sense. And and so that is sort of like the general progression. I think it's not for a lack of what words you can use. It's just that you're trying to force out a noise that is that should be a word, but instead is like a rough, right? And that's really awesome. I love that so much. That's why I love audio TF. How did I do? How did I sound?
You did great. Honestly, I was sitting here. I was like, "Wow, I'm getting a live audio TF right now. This is fantastic. I'm loving this."
Awesome. But yeah, I think in like other stories outside of audio, because I think that's the only way you can really do it in audio TF. I think there's other ways to like the person becoming a little bit more dog brained. I understand that of just like sort of a little bit more like, huh? Like oh, like you want to go like walk? What? Which I think is like kind of cool, kind of interesting, but that works better, I think, in written context. Another good context of like how voice and words and vocabulary changes in TF is the example of like if someone becomes a dog and then in the classic ironic switch of it all, their dog becomes the person. Been there, done that, right? But the dog becomes the person, and then you have to know, well, people talk. That's what people do is they talk. And this dog, which has never talked before, now needs to talk. How does it work? And I think there's lots of different ways to do it. In one sense, dogs don't really bark that much. I think we have this assumption that like when you turn into a dog, well, of course you're always barking because you're trying to say words, but you can't. And all that's coming out is these frustrated barks. But a dog that's turning into a person, well, yeah, they probably won't be talking that much. But of course you're going to give them a speech bubble anyway. And so you have to have them say something. And it's an interesting sort of like, are we going with the assumption that dogs have an idea of vocabulary of like, wait, owner? What owner doing? Confused. Who am I? Right? Like sort of simple words that somehow have entered their vocabulary, things are slipping in, or words that they already know and now they can just voice is kind of interesting. But then also from the reality shift direction, you could have that they are just sort of like understanding the context of what they're supposed to be doing. Like maybe at first they're like what's happening to you, to talk to their owner who's become a dog. And then later can be like, are you okay? Do you need to go outside? What's wrong? Because they understand that their dog has needs, and they understand that is the context they are currently in. And I'm honestly kind of a fan of the latter. Obviously, I'm a fan of reality shifting, but the idea that like it's not that they have a simple vocabulary. It's just that they are going from a world in which to bark is to just signal one notion. It's just a single, I mean, obviously there are different types of barks, I'm assuming. But to bark is to like, that is the only sound I can make, or I can just growl or whine or bark. Is like now, it's not that I have a new vocabulary, but I have a new context. And so I just have to use the words that I always use to respond to this context that I exist in now. And I find that really, really cool. And I kind of want to see more of that.
Yeah. No, I think it's such a cool concept, and I feel like it's underused sometimes in stories. And I mean, maybe it's because also, I mean, just thinking about like the perspective of an animal becoming a human, I mean, I think a lot of people, for lack of a better term, like they don't find it as interesting because they find it harder to self-insert into them because it's a wholly different being that now interacting with vocabulary and voicing. But from like an intellectual perspective, I think that's almost the most interesting because in many ways you are giving communication to someone or giving a range of communication that is far broader than what they originally had. And then you get to see them kind of grapple with, okay, how do I articulate these concepts? And like, what kind of vocabulary is being gifted in that change, and what elements of vocabulary do they still need to pick up and pick up in terms of skills, in terms of communication?
Yeah. Me personally, and I'm not sure, I mean, I change my opinions on every single brand of TF every single day. But me personally, I'm not a huge fan of like, especially like human who has changed in mind only. Or like human who is just at dog intellect right now. I'm not a huge fan of that, especially when it's just like, oh, I'm like a human, but I just like I know like 5 words total. And I'm like really, and I'm always tilting my head, but I'm like fully human. I'm dog brain, which I mean, it's kind of fun to act out because obviously when we play animal, if we play animal, we are just like, obviously you're not changing your body at all. But I think in the larger context, like the voice should be doing its best to go. The voice should be doing its best to acclimate. And I find, especially in the other direction too, like newly turned human, like some words. I know you do. Like it, like that just makes more sense to me personally.
Yeah, I guess I think also just like to put a finer nuance on it, I like the idea of an animal who does gain basically like all the sense of vocabulary, but then just has to grapple with how to use the words almost. And I think about that in particular just because, and not to go on a tangent, but I do a lot of D&D DMing or like other TTRPG DMing. Newsflash, people, there's other systems besides D&D. You should check out Pathfinder. Anyways,
I've heard good things about Pathfinder.
It's good. You know, it's I'm gonna go on this tangent now because I've been given the opportunity. When all this stuff was going on with Wizard of the Coast, I was really kind of reticent to move to something else just because I was like, oh my God, I've spent so much time understanding D&D, learning to DM D&D. Now I have to figure out all this other stuff. And some of the very generous people in my friend circles were like, let's try Pathfinder and you don't have to DM, which I was like, thank you. But since that happened, like I'd say a majority of my campaigns moved over to it, and it's honestly really good. And in particular, I mean, it's a crunchy system, so for some people that may not be their want, and that's totally understandable, but you can still have a lot of improv with it, and also have like a system and mechanics in place that make things clear, like, oh, you get 3 actions, that's it, everything is an action and you get 3 of them, instead of what's an action, what's a bonus action, what's my reaction, blah blah. No, you get 3. It's just 3. You can do whatever you want, but it's 3. You want to attack 3 times, that's fine. You want to move around, that's an action. It's very like, we have removed all of the murkiness that comes along with D&D, where they're just like, well, your DM will figure out. And it's like, well, many DMs are like, what the fuck am I supposed to do here? The rules don't say anything. I don't know what to do. But anyways, I mention all of this in a long roundabout way to relate it back to what I'm going to say here, which is I've had an opportunity to DM situations in which a character has either been like, I'll use two examples. One is a character's been like isekai'd from a children's book, and so they have all the vocabulary but none of the understanding of a lot of the different concepts. And that's not really like an animal to human TF, but it operates under a lot of similar logic, and I find that so incredibly interesting. Like, you have a character who is discovering for the first time what violence is. Like, that's so compelling. Like, how do you even like communicate what you're going through in that moment when you've never bled before, right? Or, you know, alternatively, the other situation I would mention is someone who has come from a completely different culture and level of sentience and has kind of been elevated a bit, but again, has all the vocabulary. It's just, how am I going to grasp some of these new concepts that I didn't have like a need to understand before? So like, you know, in this example, you know, a character who already understood like, you know, the basics of like, you know, eating and you know, like sexual reproduction and all that stuff, but it's like, I don't understand these higher level emotions that I'm now experiencing. Like, what is envy to me? I've never experienced that before. And I have all of the words in my head if I want to try and describe them, but how do I go about describing what envy is or an ennui? Like, how do I explain what ennui is when I've never experienced that before? That to me is fascinating. And so I relate that back to this because I think when you're kind of doing an animal to human transformation, you can play a lot with a lot of those concepts without necessarily having to go to rely on dog talk, which again, dog talk is great, don't get me wrong, but you don't have to rely on just that.
Yeah, and I think that it's a difficult concept because words do kind of shape our reality.
Oh
And I
yeah.
don't like, let's not get too smoke circle here. But like, if we didn't have words for the emotions, we would still feel them. And I
Yes.
think I've certainly felt things that I don't have words for. And that's kind of
Hmm.
difficult. And I think that's the great challenge of the writer. In a larger sense, I think
Yes.
in the writing, beyond just like the words that people are saying, I was talking about a really interesting concept, another character TF, with one of my friends. This idea of
Hmm.
like, if like, this is a fun, just consider this. I won't talk too much into it, but like a cop and some sort of criminal in a police chase. That's our start point, and our end point is going to be our favorite duo from like Zootopia or something.
Right.
And obviously, like, that's a funny dichotomy. You're going cop and thief to like the bunny and fox in a sort of animated Disney sense. Don't want to get us copyrighted. But like,
Hmm.
there's a larger sense that like beyond just the words that they're saying becoming sort of more Disneyified. I would also be intrigued to see, how does the logic of the story change? How does the way that how does the way that the police chase is happening become more Disney? How does each turn of the car start to have more of a comedic drift to it? How does like
Hmm.
how did the alleys that they're driving through now seem more comedically small? How does the staircase now have to be driven down? It's like
Hmm.
the literal logic of the world can change as well in the way that the story is written, which I think
Yeah.
is a very interesting prospect. And I think that kind of plays into what you're talking about, like having beyond just characters, or yeah, like if a character is placed in a different world, the language of the world changes too as they're experiencing it,
Exactly.
which can come through in
Yeah.
the writing as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And I find that element of communication to be really interesting at the end of the day, because everyone is going to have their own perspective on how you could best communicate it, but the way in which each individual person chooses to describe them makes it unique. And I think that that is a really powerful thing related to the creation of transformation scenarios that I wish got a bit more attention, because I do think that everyone has their own unique take on it. It's just a matter of then communicating it back out to the world, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I have no
awesome.
more to add there. Good point, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I did want to leave some time for audience questions, and I guess in this case, a singular audience question that I got from Bolus. And so Bolus asks, do you find value at all in overthinking TFs and how they would work, or does that break the immersion for you?
Okay, actually, this kind of goes into what we were talking about earlier,
It
but I think
does.
this is a good question. I think this can also hone in on like the aspects of like the actual body changing as well,
Mm,
because I don't really think we talked about that. Obviously, I am still of
no.
the point that like if something doesn't really work in the reality shift, you can just leave it out of the mind and out of reality and you're fine. But the body that is changing is pretty difficult. One of the biggest difficulties is what we wear, is clothing. I think
Mm,
everyone who has ever worked with transformation knows how much clothing sucks. Or at least I think clothing really sucks, and I hope that other people share in that opinion. I think it's great when clothing is used well to sort of rip and tear and just sort of buckle under the weight of your transformation, right? Like that's awesome. I'm not saying that that sucks. What I'm saying
yeah.
is when you start to think really detailed about the transformation. You're like suddenly you start to realize, okay, how is someone turning into a dog ripping seams down the half of someone's jeans, right? That's is that really happening? I don't believe that. I'm not convinced of that. I really think clothes hold up a lot better than we think they do, even as
Mm,
every single part of
yes.
someone's body is becoming the respective part of that animal. Unless an animal is really large, like an elephant or a horse, I think your clothes are just kind of becoming awkwardly stretched and mangled around your body. And that's difficult. That's really kind of
Yeah.
frustrating because I mean, I like the prospect of I've run into people that like really like the idea of like clothes sort of melding becoming the fur, which I think is cool. I think that's fun. It's sort of a magical way. Um, I've had stories before where I just stopped talking about the clothes in a sort of
Mm,
reality shift
yeah.
way, where it's just like, well, the clothes don't matter. They were a little bit uncomfortable earlier, but now you don't have them. Or if you do have them, what you have is your clothes have sort of become a saddle if you're a horse or something like that. And I think, as much as I really love thinking in depth about how each and every part of someone's body is changing, what's difficult is everything else that they're wearing. So I think there's a lot of value in thinking about every single detail of the transformation, but I think it's bad practice to think of every single detail in conjunction with how would it happen realistically. I think that's bad practice unless you are a true genius like some of my friends. But for me at least, I don't humor it as much as I would like to.
No, that's fair. Um, I think at least from my perspective, um, I can definitely enjoy boiling the ocean on like a specific concept or two. I
Yeah,
think it is detrimental to my own creative process to overthink.
yeah,
And I think, in particular, just because of the way my own brain works, you know, between a combination of ADHD and anxiety, like if I start overthinking the mechanics of a transformation, I'm going to go down 50 different rabbit holes. And then I am going to worry that I've gone down too many rabbit holes, which the answer will always be yes. And then all of that is going to get wrapped up in a way that will prevent me from putting out any sort of work, honestly. So, one of the biggest lessons I've honestly learned is letting go of the overthinking draw, because look, it can be extremely interesting and very sexy to think about one specific kind of transformation and all the ways in which it would work. I do
oh yeah,
not knock that. However, from the perspective of a creator, I find it can get in the way of the actual act of creation. And so, at least for me, I try to stay away from it, at least in terms of when I'm trying to make something. If I'm just like, you know, thinking about whatever idea, sure, there's no harm in overthinking things. But if you want to actually then make the jump into sharing that overthinking with other people, then you need to go through a bit of a self-editing process. And it's that process that scares me the most. It's the self-editing, because I don't know, I don't think that I am always the best self editor if I've gone down too many rabbit holes. So
Yeah. I honestly don't like editing my writing that much. I think, especially in terms of like
gasp.
nitpick.
Oh yeah, in terms of nitpicking, yeah.
In terms of like, obviously, if there's like, oh, you said that this thing fell, like this sock fell off here, and then but then you said that it fell off again later. Yeah, obviously, that's something I don't want to have happening. But like in the larger sense of like, oh, like how fast do you imagine this going? Do you really think that this part of the body would be at this point by the time that you described it happening? Yeah, sure. I'm not gonna nitpick those kind of progression things.
No, absolutely. Awesome. Well, that was all the questions that I had for you. I don't know if you had any questions for me.
And what excellent questions too. I'll leave you off with this question. If you and I were to do an audio TF, which I'll certainly start soliciting you for now, we've had this interaction. What kind of thing would you want to be involved in / do?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a great question.
If you were to be in TF audio, what role would you want to play / what would you want it to be?
Okay. So I have an anecdote and then an answer. So my anecdote is I have actually been in TF audio TFs before. I've done 2 of them. One of them is a cow transformation. I played the role of an investigative journalist who got transformed into a cow because he learned too much about a certain situation, and so the company had dispatched a hitman, so to speak, to transform him. And the other one that I was involved with was actually more than just an audio TF. It was a Patreon-only animation that was based off of different like keyframes of photos of myself, and it was actually an upside down transformation into a horse. So I did the voice acting for that too. So that's my first plug, just to say that I have been lucky enough to do them before. Both of those were done by the incredible White Flame, and I had a really good time working with him on those. Yeah, he's incredible. Now, in terms of if I had to like pick or like what sort of scenarios I would like to be involved with in the future, there's so many interesting ones. I think that one of the things that I have been drawn towards to a degree lately, and that I find really interesting, is related to inanimate transformation. Obviously a lot harder to convey certain types in terms of an audio TF, and so not always the angle in which I think a lot of people might want to go towards, but in particular, like I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff that you can do with like statues or mannequins from an audio TF perspective that I would love to see. But outside of the inanimate stuff, one of the I guess scenarios I would love to do at some point is like a big cat transformation, like like a snow leopard, my love, or like a cheetah or a lion or any of those sorts of kind of like creatures. I have always loved cats. I've always loved big cats. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can do with those. And I guess like in terms of broad scenarios, and this is independent of any sort of like final end from a creature perspective, I love a good scientific scenario. It could be like, you're a zoo enclosure volunteer, or, just a zoo volunteer who's in over their head, or, you are a plucky researcher who's a bit over their head and trying to make a certain kind of serum. And there's some sort of accident that happens, or anything else that's really like science-y based. I always find those to be really interesting, because there's just like this specific, I don't know, there's this je ne sais quoi to it of like someone who is getting changed through science to me that always hits in a more realistic way than some of the more magical, fantastical stuff. So anything related to science is usually my go-to. But I love a good magic scenario too. Don't get me wrong.
Now, we'll have to start. Also, remind me. I just finished a lion audio TF. I should share with you. I think you'll like it.
You should.
And of course, I think. Well, everyone, keep your eyes peeled for a a TF Tuesday podcast that's actually not a real TF Tuesday podcast. It's just an audio TF that is a podcast gone wrong, where Zill turns
Oh my
into like a
god.
big snow leopard.
That would be so good. Oh my god.
So keep your guys.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people
open
enjoy
for that for sometime next season.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Roscoe. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you. And if people are looking for your stuff, where can they find you?
Of course. Thank you so much for chatting with me. This was great. I had a wonderful time. You can find me on Blue Sky, DeviantArt, and for Affinity at RoscoTF. Also, my handle on Discord, if you just want to shoot me a message, is also RoscoTF. So, you can find me anywhere. I think my old Fur Affinity username is like Yeet Yeet Skeet. I like changed it visually, but I think it like still Fur Affinity is the stupid thing where like you can't change your actual username, just like what it shows up as. So if you really want to find me there, yeah. Otherwise, everywhere else, RoscoTF, no spaces. Come and find me.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, and thank you so much everyone to listening to this week's episode, and also just this entire past season. I will say it has been an interesting season with a lot of twists and turns, but I'm really happy for what we've been able to kind of put out, and am looking forward to coming back to y'all. Likely, I don't have an exact return date in mind yet, so don't hold me to this, but if all things go well, you should be hearing back from us either in the last week of January or the first week of February for season 9. So keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, as we break for the holidays, I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season in general. I hope that everyone keeps safe, bundle up if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, and make sure you're drinking lots of water if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. And remember to keep an open mind and stay TFy. And we will see you all in the new year.
Goodbye.